So we have folks from 3 cities to talk about blight remediation. We have folks from Baltimore, New Orleans, and Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. So we'll start with the folks from Baltimore. We have Michael Braverman, Tomas Bunavari, and Phil Garbodin. So I'll turn it over to
Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Baltimore. For those of you that are not from Baltimore, a little show of hands, people from Baltimore? Okay. It's a big Baltimore crowd. Well, if I were to say that we have a few vacant buildings in Baltimore, I guess that wouldn't surprise you. So we're just going to talk a little bit today about our relationship with Johns Hopkins University. I wanted to say it's a very deep relationship across many parts of the city, not just the Department of Housing and Community Development, but City Hall and other agencies, including the Health Department. But what we're going to talk about today is the Department of Housing and Community Development's relationship with Johns Hopkins 21st Century Cities program and how they help us in our efforts to address blight in Baltimore City and predict collapses, help to save lives, and help to identify how better to do interventions in the city. So there's so many people from Baltimore. I'm going to skip forward pretty quickly through some of this stuff. But just so we get a sense, Baltimore was built for about 1 million people at its peak. It's down to 620,000 people right now. There are about 16,500 vacant buildings, and now that means something to us and means something different to everyone else in Baltimore. Vacant buildings generally you would think of as an unoccupied building. It's vacant. It's unoccupied. There's a term of art in our local code which is both vacant and unsafe. And if something is both vacant and unsafe or unfit for human occupancy, it is something over which we have police powers. We can bring enforcement actions. We can demolish the property if that's appropriate. We can force the property to auction if that market will support renovation. We have all sorts of authority. We don't have that same authority over unoccupied properties. So we know there are 16,000 vacant and abandoned buildings. We don't know exactly how many unoccupieds there are. And that's part of the relationship that we're forming with Johns Hopkins, is to identify a parcel-level proxy for unoccupied buildings in the city of Baltimore, and we'll talk a little bit about why. This is just to give you a sense. We have some pretty good data. We know that the bulk of the vacant and abandoned properties are in markets right now where, for the most part, there's little, the market will not support the renovation of those properties at the present time. So some subsidy is required or some demolition dollars are required. Both in most cases. It's an extraordinary sum in Baltimore. It would add up to something north of $500 million. I see John David Evans there, if you raise your hand. John David does the analytics in the Department of Housing and Community Development with us. Therefore, we actually have a partner in Johns Hopkins, somebody who could speak that high-level math language that I don't, forgive me, and about the transfer of data. But John David tells me that number is probably between 500 million and $1 billion if we were to talk about all the subsidy and all the demolition dollars that we need. So since we get about $7.5 million a year, for at least for demolition, we have to be as strategic as possible in how we use it. And so that's also part of what we're looking for help in. This is how it sort of plays out in Baltimore. On the right side, you see the vacant and abandoned buildings. It's not the unoccupieds. That's the buildings that are board ups, essentially. And then on the left side, this is an expensive foray that we've taken with a group called the Reinvestment Fund in Philadelphia. They do a fantastic job, and I know New Orleans has spent money. I don't know about Wyandotte. But to create a housing market typology, just using a tremendous number of variables to determine the strength of a particular housing market. That's what we're talking about. And lo and behold, the vacant building is the perfect proxy for a weak market. So this is just a sense of, like, when we came to Johns Hopkins for help, we already did have a significant data infrastructure. This is a little snapshot